Okay, we are live for another casual Saturday live stream hangout. Nice to see you guys already in the chat. Yeah, I'm just gonna get going here. Make sure everything's working. As usual, let me know how the audio levels are. It's the downside of doing the one-man show. We have a slightly different camera angle this time because yeah, it's a little bit wider so you can see all the clutter in the background. So the boxes of things and headphones in the background. You can see there's the LCD XC right there. I think you can see that. But yeah, okay. Let's get going with the live stream as usual. Let's just dive right into the Q&A. And of course, I'm just gonna shout out if anybody wants to find measurements of anything. There is a measurement database linked down below, as well as a headphone ranking list. I'm just gonna say that at the start of this, and then I'll also mention that again at the end for anybody who came in a little bit later. And so if you guys are wondering, how would I rank a given headphone or compare, different headphones, that already exists down below. So let me just dive into the chat here. Good to see everybody. And again, let me know how the audio. Yeah, see, there is audio success. All right, that's good. That's always good. I'm gonna start at the top. I got an HE6 V2, and everyone's saying to plug it into a nuclear submarine, but a 789 drives it loud with tighter and stronger bass than I've heard on any planar. Any reason to use a speaker amp? Yeah, so that whole idea about speaker amps is difficult to verify because when people make those kinds of claims, they're often making subjective claims. Like, this sounds really good out of a speaker amp, so it's hard to verify that that's true. Now I have, as it happens, heard not the V2 but the original HE6 off of a speaker amp, and sure, it was better, and it was very good, but that could have just been because it was that specific amplifier, and that doesn't mean that it necessarily is because it's a speaker amplifier. Okay, so that idea about you need a speaker amplifier to run it is nonsense. But you may want a speaker amplifier if the pairing is good. The big caveat there that I'm going to mention is that there are people who've blown up their headphones because they're trying to chase the speaker amp meme. So for that reason, I'm going to say you probably don't need to do that. And if you do, just make sure you do your research on that and see what everyone's doing, because like the HE6s are notorious for that. For people driving them off of speaker amps and being ridiculous with the amount of power that they give it. So my recommendation would be to stick with your 789, or if you are going to go up to something else, like do that later, because it's the amount of money that you put in. Like, again, there's going to be a theme, and it's constant. It's a constant theme. Collectively, we need to shift our consciousness away from sources make a meaningful difference, because they do not. They do make a difference, but it's nowhere near as meaningful as just changing from one headphone to a different headphone. All right, so, or even using EQ. So we're gonna stop collectively with the sunk cost fallacy of chasing more source gear that costs more than the headphones. Rob, there's a cool video at the Focal Factory. The authentic French accents of the extras was a nice touch as well. Yeah, those guys were just doing the tour. So that the main guy there who was giving the tour, I think he's one of the product managers for the speaker division. And when we were there was us, which was like mostly the people who were in the video. But then there was also like a whole bunch of there's a crew, like a whole bunch of other people from different publications and things like that. So actually there's probably been coverage of that tour on other publications, but those other publications focus more on speakers, or predominantly on speakers. And so I think for a large, in general, that's why, one of the reasons why a lot of it was focused towards the speaker production. But the headphone stuff was also shown as well. What's up, Bambayu? Good to see you. I was thinking of buying Edition XS and the SML stack as my first open back. Wanted to buy a shit stack, but it is significantly more expensive in Europe. Do you think it's an appropriate combo? Yeah, I think that would be fine. You could also go with an IFI stack if you want to get the bass boost function. Because I know a lot of people, like, the planars, they have linear bass, and they can't, again, unless there's some sort of trickery going on with the coupling, you're not going to get a bass boost out of a planar. Again, unless it's like, decoupled here somehow, right? If you're not getting a seal. So, I would say if you want more bass, then that would be something to consider. But yeah, I think that's a fine setup. Is 64 audio U12T really that good? Does it really project sound outside your head? Extra wide soundstage. So, again, I think the soundstage thing with IEMs is a bit of a meme. I agree with Kryn there. I will say, though, there is definitely better and worse. So if you want like really good soundstage, the best soundstage I've heard in IEM is like the Tia Forte or like the Legend X. I'm thinking of for close back because there are some more esoteric choices as well. But yeah, I would definitely say the those ones, and they are meaningfully better than something like the Moondrop, Aria, for example, or any of those Moondrop dynamic driver IEMs. And a lot of that I imagine has to do with fit, but I also think that a lot of it is to do with the tuning. And with U12T, again, soundstage, I wouldn't say extra wide, but certainly fine, right? And as it was not super intimate experience, it's a very airy experience if that's what you're looking for. But is it really that good? Yeah, I'd say it is either the best or one of the best IEMs out there. There's stuff like the Elysian Annihilator that I haven't heard, so I can't really make that claim. But yeah, I think that the U12T is it's probably, if somebody were like, hey, have any IEM in the world, it's probably still the one that I would choose. So on that topic, I've been really enjoying the U6T, which is kind of like a bassier, sub-bassier version with a little bit more of an angry presentation to the upper mids, but in a way that I kind of like. So yeah, there's maybe they both have, I wouldn't call them, let's say, neutral, but there's a slight coloration in a way that's really, really nice. So yeah, I need to do a video on the U6T because I just spent the weekend listening to that, and holy crap, that's so good. That might be my new favorite, like, sub $1,500 IEM at this point, and I like it better than the Neo. So there's that. Resolve one of the best audiophiles in the world. Are we ranking audiophiles now? I appreciate you saying that. But there's lots of people who have good, opinions, so I'm just one of them. Any chance of getting a Fostex TH900 Mark II Sapphire or White to measure? I would love to. And I think it was somebody from one of my Discord friends mentioned it, but also I just said, look, I don't want to take people's headphones away from them, the ones that they love. So, I don't want to, that just feels weird. So as much as, yes, I've done it and I will continue to do it, it never feels, there's always an uneasy feeling there when you're, measuring other people's equipment, because not only do you not want anything to be damaged, right? That's when there's shipping and all that, but or even get lost, which would be the worst case scenario. But also, you're depriving them of using their headphones for 2 weeks or more sometimes, because that's usually how long it takes to do an evaluation. Any portable headphone recommendations, which is easy to drive, close back, already owning a K371 and want an upgrade? It's okay. The upgrade, I think, would be like the DCA Aeon X closed from Drop, or the Aeon Noir for more portability. The only downside is that you do need an amplifier with those. So if you have some sort of portable amplifier device, which there are, then I would recommend those for sure. Not the opens. The DCA closed are better than the open ones. Yeah, for sure. What do you mean I don't need a $50 billion amp for my LCD X that gets louder than the IEMs in some game? Yeah, but that, okay, obviously not. That's right. Like, no. But just to be fair, the HE6 and HE6 SEV2 are very different headphones from the LCD X. So that's, yeah, that's not really fair. What's up, Metal? Oh, so you're not an exponent. Have you ever tried tactile transducers while listening to headphones? Might be, no, I have. I know what you're talking about. Not a fan of that stuff. You mean like the thing that is like the physical feeling? Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. The U12T sounds very tall on orchestra tracks, completely out of your head. The IER Z1R has the widest soundstage, similar to a long haul in terms of left-right imaging. Overall, I like the U12T more. That seems like a reasonable take. Soundstage in general is a bit of a meme. Like, I gotta say, like, yes, you know, left and right spaciousness, right? That's I don't know, this is just me, and maybe I'm alone here, but like, for me, while it's that quality is noticeable, what I find far more engaging is good control during busy passages and the ability to sort of like isolate individual instrument lines. So I got kind of like, you know, attacked for saying this, but like, you know how like the HD6XX and 600, they have a very tight soundstage, like a very three blobby intimate kind of presentation, and there's also a reason for that. But the at the same time, they're very detailed and very good at that sort of instrument separation. Now, those two things are different, and I gotta say, the image separation and control during busy passages, and that, like, being able to continue to hear clear tones coming through, even when there's lots of stuff going on, and, you know, isolate those tones rather than having them blend together. That to me matters so much more than things being like super far apart, right? And even though, yes, I grant that, like, if we want to get closer to speakers, you know, there is going to be a benefit to soundstage for sure. But to me, it's like those other qualities, they matter more. Like, I suppose you could call that imaging. I don't know what I would call that more like that's why I call it structural definition for images, right? At least subjectively. But that is the thing that, to me, I remember the first time I heard that, and it was on the HE500. I was like, wow. And so I guess, you know, that's sort of taken over my attention or my focus. But obviously, yeah, I like other stuff as well. Like, you know, I like it to be spacious. I like it to be good for clarity for trailing ends of tones. I like it to be punchy and impactful. But that separation thing is the most important thing to me. Do you think amps and Dacs make a difference for soundstage imaging, or is it more audiophile fluff? Yes and no. There are so I think this is a difficult one to delineate because there is also audiophile fluff, right? So like I would actually say that in the majority of cases, you're just reading, you know, anecdotal reports of this stuff. You know, I think you can be fairly sure that a lot of that is just. Actually, I'm gonna pull back and say it's not audiophile fluff. I don't think they're not having those experiences. I just think that there are all those other framing effects that are, you know, influencing them, and influencing everybody. They influence me, right? It's impossible to sort of like, you know, get rid of some of these framing effects. You can hedge against them as best you can, but you know, that stuff does creep in. At the same time, it is also possible that an amp and a DAC could have this effect. Like, for example, with IFI's X space function, that actually changes the frequency response. And it does have that effect. So, especially if you use like the Pro ICANN setup, where you can actually dial that in to varying degrees, that does have an effect. So yes, it's one of those where it's like, yes, on both counts, it is both a thing and also audiophile fluff. But I don't like the idea of calling something audiophile fluff because, like, you know, I don't like to. I don't like the idea of like denigrating people's experiences. Like, if somebody, you know, if somebody makes a claim, oh yeah, this sounds so much more. It opens up. It sounds so much more, you know, X Y Z. That doesn't mean they're not having that experience. It's just that that comes from somewhere that isn't uniquely related to the equipment that they're talking about. Or maybe there's some other, like, for example, a lot of the time people will talk about really open and spacious presentations as a result of listening to headphones that are open, and they're hearing things in their environment that they wouldn't otherwise hear. And that's the thing that makes them, you know, have an experience of it being open. So it's not to say that they aren't having that experience. It's just to say that, you know, it could be attributed to something not necessarily solely related to the equipment that they're using. How's that? So I got to catch up here. If I've missed your question, feel free to ask it again. Why are there so few good close-back options in the mid/lo-fi market? Lo-fi. I know there's the K371s, the Aeon closed. I was wondering if you had more options to consider below 1K. Below 1K, you got the Celesti. The Radiance is around there too. You've got the Noir. Oh no, you said Aeon closed. You got, I think there's the EM Utique. Are the for some reason I was thinking that Atticus was around 1K, but I think it's more. Yeah. I mean, there's not that many options, but there are some. I want to get an EM Utique in, because I hear it's interesting. Oh, I see. Yeah, EM Utique. Best closeback is price range. We'll see, right? I still think that the best closeback under $500 is that Aeon X closed, because as much as it's not nothing really that special for technicalities, its frequency response is outstanding. So that's probably what I would buy. Oh, what's up, Crin? Fromage du omelette. Yeah. Oh, shoot. Yeah, it is going to overheat if I don't do this. Hold on. Because I'm in 4K right now. Thanks for reminding me. I'm in 4K 60 frames a second. So we got to change that. I don't know why. Oh, I know why I was at 60 frames a second. All right, we can change this. We can fix. Is this going to break everything if I do it? Let's see. No, it didn't break anything. So we're good. Now we're in 1080p. That's because my stream output hasn't changed. Yeah, it would have overheated if I hadn't just fixed that. So thanks for reminding me. So the other thing is, like, I can't really control the colors that well in a live stream environment, but that's okay. Yeah, people always ask about the Vocalilegia these days. So, and it's interesting because I know that there's a bunch that you could potentially still buy. My recommendation is funny because, like, would I recommend it now to somebody who hasn't, who is not going to EQ? My answer is probably not, because I really do think in order to get the most out of that, you'd want to EQ it. But and now at around that price, that Aeon closed X exists, because before it didn't. And before, as much, you know, the original Aeons were like a lot more expensive, and also they were a little too clampy. But the Aeon X closed is really good. And I would definitely take that over the Elegia personally, especially if I'm not going to EQ. So even though the Elegia is going to be more detailed, is going to be a bit more dynamically fun, you know, the tuning of the Aeon makes it better. So we're going to fix this. This has become Resolve fiddles with his camera. Is this better? How's that? All right. Resolve is tall. I am 6'1". Do not rank the humans. All right, let's keep going here, guys. Did you have a chance to try the 840A? So DMS did a review of that one. I'm more interested in like the 1540, like the open back. That's the one I'm interested in. Best neutral tuned IEM under $250. C Audio Yume Midnight? Close enough. I mean, I know there's the edemotic stuff as well. So if you're okay with the, the deep insertion of the edemotics, consider those. But yeah, the C Audio Yume Midnight is the one I would get. I have a hard time with the edemotics. They also sound shouty to me. What IEMs do you use the most often nowadays? So it was the SA6 until I started listening to the 64 Audio U6T. Goddamn. it is something. Again, I need to do a video on that one because it is subjectively outstanding for all the things that are difficult to identify in measurements. The widest fromage, the widest omelette. Yep. The widest food tier list. DT880 versus DT1990 versus DT900 Pro X. 880 out of all of those. 900 Pro X is the least detailed. It's the dullest. 1990 is the sibilantest, and the DT880 is like okay. Oh yeah, I do need to. Yeah, Chef Steve, I need to get that 600 ohm DT880 in. That is something that I'm curious about because like the high impedance, there is definitely like a meme about high impedance and performance that I don't know if is true, but has been true in some examples. So that's what I'm wondering about. If the Beyerdynamic, well, I assume it's changes to the coil for the increased impedance, but in other examples like the Audio-Technica R70X, that's not a very detailed headphone, or it's like kind of a hazy. I agree with Metal on that one. It's a bit hazy and grainy, even though the tuning is great. The fact that it's super high impedance, regardless of what amplifier I drove it with, like it did not really change that much. It changed less than the Sennheiser HD600 series. So there's that. Opinions on M1060 and M1060C. I need to get some of those in for review, but my opinions are that they have issues. That driver specifically has issues, and I know who makes the driver actually, or who made it. How do the ANX close compare to the Sundaras? That's an interesting comparison. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, obviously the ANX closed is closed. If you want better detail and better, let's call it subjective technicalities, the Sundara, absolutely. But if you want more bass presence, because the Aeon X closed actually has a bass shelf, then go with the Aeon X closed. That's how I would describe the two. Both are, well, I don't know, I'd say both of them are reasonably comfortable as well. They're not super heavy. I wish the Sundara had cup swivel, but that's okay. Oh, I discovered something with the Sundara. Pardon me. All right, you're gonna have to bear with me here. Pardon my reach. Let's check this out. You know how like the Sundara has, okay, the Sundara bass kind of tapers off, 20-30 hertz, or like in the ultra low sub bass stuff, right? So I actually found out why. And so check this out. I'm sure you guys can see this, but there is, oh, come on, focus on it. All right. So for this piece, right, there's a gasket under there. So the pads clip into this piece, right? And the gasket doesn't have as much of a function because in between this piece and the cup, there's a gap. There's an air gap there. Which basically functions the same way that an air gap does for like if you like for just planar magnetic headphones in general. in that it's going to increase the bass a little bit, and then have it taper off earlier. And so that's kind of why you see that. Like if you compare the bass of the Sundara to the bass of like any of those other like even just like Odysseys, for example, or any or the just some of the newer designs that they have that Hi-Fi Man does, or even HE6 SE V2 and stuff like that. That if you take the pads off of those, they don't have the gap between the ring where the gasket is and the cup, which I find very interesting, and that nobody's really mentioned that before. That's why that happens. And in theory, if you wanted to get full bass extension, if you care that much about 30 hertz and 20 hertz, which I would actually argue it's probably better to have it this way with the gap, because then you actually get a little bit of boost and you actually get more bass as a result, like more bass in the tones that are heard. It's better to have the gap. But if you wanted to, if you're like a mirror or someone who like cares about like making sure that it goes to 20 hertz, right, where there's like hardly any information, you could potentially just like tape up or seal this part of the headphone, like the between the ring and then the back piece. So I don't recommend doing that, because again, like I'd rather have the extra bass presence that you get by the boost, from there being an air gap. But that's why that happens. And I think to me it's just like when I made that, when I took the pads off and I was like doing that comparison, I was like, wait, what? This one has a gap. And then I checked multiple Sundaras and they all have that gap. So anyways, I just think that's really cool. And incidentally, the other thing that it fixes is, you know how like the Hi-Fi Meds, they normally have the mid-range like 1K kind of slight elevation, and then it dips down at around 1.5K. The gap fixes that to a large degree as well. Yeah, really cool. Really cool. Your camera's like a Volkswagen, always overheating. Considering I don't actually need closeback, would you get the Focal Elegia for 500, or would the Alex be worth it for the extra money? Oh, Alex definitely would be. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things, like, I don't know, like some people watched that review from, I think, Zeos on the Elegia, where he said it was like the best Focal. No. The Alex is I mean, as much as I like the treble of the Elegia better, the Alex is far more balanced overall for its tuning. And then you can run it off of a tube amp if you want to get, or like something with higher output impedance if you want to like, downward tilt it. That's what I do. But, well, it's not an Alex, it's a Lear, but you get the idea. So this is the thing. You also have to be very careful when using it with tube amplifiers. I need to do a video on this. So this is an Lear with Utopia pads, and I run it off of a 32 ohm out from the amps at Sound Kenzie. I would not go higher than that, because if you down tilt it too much, as soon as you increase the volume, you are going to get closer to the clipping driver excursion limit. So I measured on these, it's at around 107 dB for the excursion limit. I measured the Utopia. It's around 110 dB, which is like, that'll damage your ears very quickly if you listen that loud. But the thing is, like, if you bass boost with EQ, with output impedance, with like the X bass function on IFI devices or something like that, the driver excursion limit threshold is far lower. It's about 10 dB lower on the IFI devices, for example. So you have to keep that same thing in mind when running it off of a higher output impedance source. And I really wouldn't go higher than 32 ohm for output impedance on it, because it's an 80 ohm headphone, and you don't want to do it, boost that too much. Best sub $500 closeback? Yeah, in my mind, it's the Aeon X closed, or K371. No, I think Aeon X closed would be my answer there. It's a little bit on the dull, blunted side for technicalities, but the tuning is so good, it doesn't matter. Currently listening to the OG Audio Monarch, listen to mostly EDM, owned Sony IER Z1R, but too uncomfortable. What IEM would you suggest? SA6 or IE600? Man, I don't know. In some ways IE600, but like I don't know where you're gonna get one. Or maybe it's released where you are, but it's not released in North America. Oh, you guys are asking about the Rode. So I did a review. It's already, the written review's already done up on headphones.com if you guys want to check that out. It includes the measurements. It includes the mod, the foam mod on it, and then also some other measurements as well. So if you're curious about that, check it out. But there will also be a video on that tomorrow, at least if I get the thumbnail done in time. The short answer on the Rode is that no, it does not unseat the K371. The Rode by default kind of sounds like listening through a blanket, but with the foam mod, it's quite interesting actually. So yeah, if you're curious about that, that'll be tomorrow. Good morning, Resolve. Good morning, Dakota Rogers. You should do a video on an old headphone and what is still relevant, what's new, and what is not always better. I mean, HD600, HD650 are legendary headphones for a reason. So is that a 2020 Sundara? Yeah, so I think the only thing that changed was the pads. There was a driver revision early on, not in 2019 or 2020. I think it was in 2018 when that happened. But no, this is the change was to the pads, and I think it was what probably happened was they changed the glue to make it so that the pads wouldn't disintegrate, and then in so doing, it also the new structure also improved the tuning. So kind of interesting. And the pads do look and feel a little different when you have them side by side. So it just goes to show how important pads are. 3 biggest audio myths. 3 biggest audio myths. Well, it depends what you mean by biggest, because there's like biggest in the sense of like most nonsense, and then there's biggest in the sense of like what people believe, right? Because there's definitely, like, people talk a lot about like burn-in, right? For example, burn-in technically is a thing. But not something that anybody should ever worry about. And by that I mean, like, it is entirely possible for a driver to change through use over a few minutes, right? When it's first being used. This is something that Oratory talked about. But at no point is that something that's actually going to happen to a person. And the idea that, like, things are going to change over 150 hours, that is nonsense. That is a total myth. Because at the same time, the things that will change are how the pads wear in as you wear them. And that can have an effect, because this doesn't sound the same as this. So the pad compression, that's really where most of burn-in can be attributed. But the idea that you need to play, run the headphones, over the course of, a week or something like that before listening is total nonsense. And yeah, like when you buy a headphone, I can't think of any case where that headphone hasn't also been tested for driver match. Well, there's probably some, but like in the, for like cheap, crappy headphones, but like for any of the headphones that we're talking about, like, headphones that are, let's say, good headphones, it's not something you should worry about. Another one would be obviously cables do cables make a difference? I'm gonna say I haven't heard anything from cables that I've been like that there's a difference there, so that's probably another myth. But I don't know how prevalent that is these days, because I think these days there's a bit of a sink or swim element to this hobby, where, and even the industry, where the things that are kind of propped up, like the snake oil stuff, right, that gets propped up in certain communities, as making a difference, that stuff is, I think that's the stuff that's going to sink, and the stuff that is going to swim is, the more, like, let's say, grounded discussions about frequency response and how significant that is, and where, doing a better analysis of frequency response and potentially other types of behavior, including THD, like I'm not THD, but including harmonic distortion. That's an interesting subject. I'm not saying it means all that much, but it's an interesting subject. Yeah, I mean, as much as in most cases, that's probably the next biggest myth. The idea that low distortion is the absence, or sorry, the absence of distortion is detail, because it is not. People will look at, just distortion plots and measurements, go, oh yeah, this must be more detailed because it has lower distortion. But that's false. That's, there, yeah. And to demonstrate that, look at anything produced by Abyss. Those are very, very detailed, but they are also very high distortion. And also, like this, you can find headphones that have lower distortion than like I've listened to headphones that have like unbelievably low distortion that are just horrible for detail. They sound dull and blunted and awful. So no, low distortion is not the absence of detail. Or sorry, low distortion is not detail. The absence of distortion is not detail. So yeah, that's my answer. Let's see. Oh, Son Goku. Okay, meant to add for better, punchier, fuller bass. Probably IE600 then, because it's dynamic driver. Audiophile stones. Oh. What is going on? Guys, if I've missed your question, like I have to catch up, right? Otherwise I'm talking about stuff that's like super old. So just feel free to ask it again if I missed your question. I'm very curious about that Austrian hi-fi, was the X60 that Oratory measured, because the first one was so bonkers. And that, that's why I was like, we already know that it's not good, but the newer one looks very interesting. So I'm curious about that one. What is your favorite headphones brand and IEM brands? Favorite headphones brand? It's tough to say, because okay, so when I'm reviewing stuff, I don't ever review the brand. At least, like, I may have preferences for some brands for the products that they make, right? But it's not because of the brand, right? At the same time, there are practices of certain brands that I really value, that I think make them better than the practices that other brands have. So, for example, I really like Sennheiser's, or at least I don't know, but the new, we'll find out, right, with the new acquisition. But like Sennheiser is a company that I really respect and value what they do have done, as a company in audio. At the same time, I like the Focal Clear better than I like the HD800S, right? For example, or just like, if you want to go all the way to the high end, Focal Utopia, I like that better. I think it sounds better. And it's obviously not apples to apples because of the price, but you get what I mean, right? Like, there are products from different brands, even at the 600, 650 level. Like I would take a Sundara 2020 over an HD650 or HD6XX, right? So with all that said, I still think Sennheiser as a company, I like them better. Like, I like what they're doing and what they stand for better. And so with that in mind, for over-ear headphones, yeah, I would say Sennheiser is kind of up there for me. They have traditionally at least had a lot of very interesting stuff turn into amazing results. And then also Odyssey. I really like some of the approach that Odyssey has to things. Now, with that said, the tunings of Hi-Fi Men planars is almost always better than what Odyssey tunings are. But that doesn't mean that I like Hi-Fi Man better than Odyssey, if that makes sense. What I love about Odyssey, for example, is their willingness to engage with the community in terms that are very grounded and down to earth, right? Like you can have at least I don't know about everybody, but like I've had conversations with Sankar where you actually like get to know the person, and you know they'll be real with you. There's no marketing speak, key messages, and any of that kind of stuff, and I really respect that. So that's not to say that exists, in other places, prevalently, but it does. Like there are companies where it's harder to have those conversations because companies are larger. And then for IEMs, absolutely Dunu, 100% Dunu is my favorite brand for that kind of thing. But they haven't always made products that are home runs. Like I wasn't that huge of a fan of the EST 112. I think their products, while they're like, for example, the SA6 has gotten a lot of attention, but I'm not, and it's probably one of my favorite. Well, it's definitely my favorite IEM at that price. I would have a harder time saying, I would take the Dunu Luna over a U6T, for example. 64 Audio, speaking of which, is another IEM brand that I really, really, really like. And obviously Moondrop is good too, but like typically their tunings are a little shouty for me. But that's just me. Okay. Is Kryn still here? I think he just he comes in to say what's up and then bounces. Which is fair enough. These can go long. What's up? Jake is here. All them paid high X55 reviews praising them. Yeah. Yeah. You over the Radiance? Someone's asking about the LCD XC 2021 versus the Radiance. So yes, I do like the LCD XC better than the Radiance. It's on my ranking list there, ahead of the Radiance. But that's with EQ. Without EQ, I would take the Radiance. Also, the LCD XC is very heavy. Like with LCD XC, you mainly need to boost the bass and sub bass. Like you need to give it a bass shelf, and then there's a little bit of futzing in the treble, but like that's the key thing there. With the Radiance, I mean, yeah, like it's a little more, it's warm, but it's a little more normal without EQ. But yeah. Okay, here we go. Trying to find a top of the line open back headphone that's warm, neutral with present and fast bass for modern music. Clear OGs were great, but they clip too easily, returning them. Any suggestions? Utopia. So I did a whole testing thing to find out the clipping threshold on Focal headphones. I tested the Alere, the Clear. I think I tested this. Might have tested the Celeste, and the Utopia. And the clipping threshold, I can't remember if I did this last time. Maybe I'll need to go back and check. But for all the open backs, the clipping threshold is between 107 and 110 dB at 1K. Now, if you don't know how loud that is, look that up. You will, if you're listening at that level, you will damage your hearing in a matter of minutes? I mean, maybe not minutes, but like you will damage your hearing very fast, and nobody's going to want to listen that loud because it will be excruciatingly painful. Now, where where the where the explanation shows up for why people have experienced clipping is that they're either running it off of a high output impedance source, like a and maybe they don't know it's high output impedance. Like in this case, I'm doing that intentionally, but like I'm also not listening that loud. When you run it off a high output impedance source, those headphones boost in the bass, meaning that your driver excursion limit is getting hit faster or earlier on. And that dramatically reduces the volume level, the clipping threshold, the one that I saw on the IFI device where I was using the X bass function was a 10 dB, 12 dB bass boost in the sub bass. Because of that, that reduced the clipping threshold to 94 dB or something like that, right? Or 98 dB or something, which is still loud, but it's much more possible that you would hit it. So, and again, if the clipping threshold is significantly lower than that, like if you're hearing clipping without any EQ out of a low output impedance source, and you're not physically feeling pain, one of two things is true: either the headphones are broken, or and you should probably get them warrantied, or there's some hearing damage that's taken place already. And you can see the clipping threshold. It's below 105, 106 dB or whatever it was. No, it doesn't clip. And maybe I'll do a video on this at some point, because you can actually yes, you can see the distortion, like the high order distortion when it clips, but it's kind of like but you can also hear it happening, right? From outside of the headphones, you can actually hear, because they're open back. So maybe I'll do a video on that where I show where the actual clipping threshold is. And the other interesting thing that I found with the Focal headphones and clipping is the clipping happens, like the earliest that it shows up is in frequencies that are below the range of human hearing. So it happens the most, or the earliest part where the driver excursion limit gets hit is at around 7 dB, 7 to 10 dB. Sorry, 7 to 10 hertz. And that's way below human hearing, right? Now, if you're running test tones from 0 to 20K, there's a chance that you could hit that at around 7 dB if you're listening ridiculously loud, right? Or if you're EQing something like crazy at 7 hertz. But as soon as I went to 20 hertz, 21, 22, that threshold was higher still. So this whole idea about the excursion limit and clipping with Focal, no, it's only if it's being used in conditions with significant EQ boosts or output impedance, some sort of output impedance synergy going on with the source, or like a deliberate function like the IFI devices. If you're running it in normal conditions, that you'll go deaf very fast. And yeah, if you want to see the measurements for that, that's up on the forum there. Edit Wolf, thank you. I went from Aria to an HE1000 recently and I'm impressed. Can you get similar gains with amplifiers? No. Although Aria to HE1000, I don't know. I haven't done that test. I'm sorry. So I can't tell you that really. Because there's also the HE1000 V1, V2, and SE. And the SE was very much more detailed. But I didn't do the comparison between the Aria V2 and the HE1000 V2 and the Aria. But no, like yes, the amplifiers make a difference, but they are not going to be as different as going from one headphone to another. When you're making a squig link, I'm not making a squig link. I'm actually working on a graphing database, but there is a measurement data, so it'll be like that, but it doesn't exist yet. But there is already a database up on the forum there if you're curious about that. What is happening? Oh. Okay. Sorry. If HDA100S is what you like, you're talking about that, yeah. LCD-X is the best all-rounder under 4K that I know of. I'd still just say the Utopia is the best all-rounder under 4K. Well, I guess it's like more expensive now. It's like 4.4. Because they did the update with the pads and all that stuff. But I don't know. In my view, like headphones shouldn't cost more than $2,000. Like, I mean, I know that like headphones cost what the market will bear. That's just how economics works, right? It's what people are willing to pay. But I like thinking about like what goes into headphones. Yeah, I don't think that they should cost more than $2,000. But that's just me. Like, the thing, actually, you know what's funny is like the thing that I would want to hedge against, or I what I don't like is the idea of headphones as accessories in the same ways that designer like handbags and shit like that are, you know, they go up dramatically in price because of designer, you know, branding and stuff like that. That's what I don't want to see happen with headphones, and that's why I don't like. I think sometimes the exorbitant price tags that you see, they're intentional for that. They're trying to make it like that, and that's what I mean. And it's even companies that I love, like companies that are making products like, you know, Odyssey stuff, Hi-Fi Man stuff, Focal stuff, like the stuff that is very high, very expensive. That's done so strategically because it puts them in a unique space on the shelf that only, you know, certain people are going to reach. And then you see other brands doing that. I'm not going to say who. And their headphones aren't even remotely competitive, but they see the advantages that are gained from a market standpoint, right? They see that like, oh yeah, this ekes out a unique place in the market, and we want to play in that game. But to me, that's equivalent to treating headphones like handbag accessories, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, let's just increase the price because it you know, it creates this, you know, I don't know, this it puts it on a pedestal. And to me, that's not necessary. Rob, thank you. Have you met audiophiles who've lost hearing from listening too loud? No, but I have met. If you've ever gone to a show and you've tried headphones on after somebody else has, it's quite common for people to be listening very loud. Now, part of that is because it's show conditions and they're trying to, you know, drown out the rest of the environment and get the best sense they can. But sometimes you end up sometimes you end up listening to something after, and you think like, how could this person still have any kind of hearing left for listening that loud? All right. If you choose these headphone brands like Bose, Sony, Audio-Technica, Marshall, JBL, what will you choose? JBL or Sony, if you're talking about the IEMs. Out of all those, JBL, maybe Audio-Technica. Audio-Technica stuff is really well built, but the tunings are just a little on the intense side sometimes. JBL is a Harman company, so JBL for sure. At the very least, they've put, you know, a lot of research into headphone tunings. How many hours do you put into your headphone before reviewing it? It's usually about 2 weeks with the headphones. Ideally, sometimes I don't have quite enough time to do that if there's lots of stuff that I need to get out to get done. But usually it's around 2 weeks, in like with multiple different sources and in ideal conditions. But also like when I'm doing the measurements, sometimes that takes the better part of a day, or like maybe not a day, but like it's like the main focus of a day. Doing all the different measurements, curating them, like making sure that if there was one position where the seal wasn't representative, you can just remove that one. It's pretty easy to see. Doing things like air gap behavior and whatnot, which I try and do, but it's not always possible, it's also not always necessary. And then on head measurements as well, to make sure that the results I get from the rig are that they match with what's actually like on an actual human head for the bass. That could take a lot of time, and then also I typically will post that up on the headphone community forum in the forum threads, and just write sort of the notes there. So like, I would, that's sometimes those posts, if they're a first impressions post, that's before I've had a chance to put the rest of the time in, like the 2 weeks or whatever. But for a full review, that's usually about 2 weeks. Is the ZMF Atrium review incoming? Unfortunately, no. I don't have one. So I think DMS is going to do one on his channel because I think he bought one. But yeah, I don't have one, and there's nothing on the radar for that. Don't buy based on a company, but on an individual model basis. Yes, that is very good advice. Sennheiser's made great headphones. They've also made a couple of duds. HD820, I'm going to say that was a dud. HD700, kind of a dud. But, HD580, HD600, HD650, HD800S, the IE 900 and 600, although I haven't heard the 600. But you get the idea, right? Like, all companies, like, not every company has made nothing but gems. Even 64 Audio, 64 Audio is a company that has made mostly solid stuff, but there's some stuff there where I'm like, oof, like the tunings, they're just not they're not ideal. So yeah, this is not something that everybody, that there's one company that is like uniquely immune to. There's issues everywhere. So just research the product. Yeah, so you guys, I see a lot of people asking about like amps and Dacs, which is normal. As I mentioned in the last live stream, I don't want to do amp and DAC reviews until I'm set up to do that, which I am working on getting set up to do, including amp and DAC measurements and stuff like that. Don't worry, we're not going to get into the like what you see with Synad and stuff like that. We're not going to be doing that, but specifically, I'm going to be doing ABX comparisons, and that is it's, I have one right now, but it's just a PCB, so I want to make it so that it's actually something that I can use a little bit more easily and put in videos and stuff like that. So once I'm set up to do that, then I will get all the source memeing out of my system. Any insider information on Utopia update or replacement? Okay, so no, I don't have any insider information on that. But also, if I did, would I make it public in this forum? Like, would I tell you guys? Probably not. Because I probably wouldn't be able to. All right. Sennheiser Momentum 3 or Drop THX Panda. So if you look at my ranking list, the Drop THX Panda is at the very bottom. It is possibly, it's not the worst headphone I've heard. I still think that Andover thing was worse. But it is one of the worst headphones because it is extremely dull and blunted sounding with heavy driver damping. Front damping. Not ideal. I should double check it. I haven't taken it apart, but like that's what it sounds like. So yeah, Momentum 3 is actually reasonably detailed for a wireless headphone. I think the other one there that you want to consider, like the Odyssey Mobius, is so much better sounding than the Panda. It's amazing. And it's kind of, I don't know, it kind of blows my mind that like when I saw people doing reviews of it, they didn't hear how blunted it was. So yeah, I when I say blunted, I mean like the trailing ends of tones are not clear; they are lopped off, And maybe that's masking from frequency response. Maybe that's something else. But man, it has it. Under no circumstances do I recommend the drop THX Panda. GC, what's your question? I don't see your question, GC. No, Moondrop makes really awesome stuff. They're just too shouty for me. Like, except for the Blessing too, but the S8 and the variations, they're very detailed, but just too shouty for me. HD100S versus Focal Clear MG. Which one is better value for money? OG Clear is the best value for money there because it's at 990, I think. So, yeah. A neutral warm open back top of the line headphone with punchy bass for modern music. In some sense, Utopia is that. Weirdly, people thought Utopia was bright. Not on any measurement that I've done of it. I feel like I'm repeating myself. Utopia is not a bright headphone. It has some like peaks in the treble, but it's not bright. It's the Utopia coloration is it's more of like a mid forward kind of presence. At around 1.5K, I think. Not unlike what you get with the Sennheiser 650. But obviously the Utopia's got way better bass extension. And you said punchy, and that's one of the punchiest headphones you could buy. But other than that, I mean, yeah, clear. Depends on what you consider top of the line. Make an IEM ranking? At some point, yeah. Panda is a muddy swamp? Yes. What are you guys talking about? Okay, guys, enough Texan. What? All right. Shure SRH 840 non-A. What are you asking me about this? I have not heard it, so I'm sorry. A Shure SRH 840. Yeah, all right. Yeah, it's not that Utopia is not fatiguing at all. It's not. And like what you see there in the measurements, on some measurements, I actually think that that's just like a positioning thing. Like when you change the positioning there, because they're spring-loaded cups, it can be actually very difficult to measure even the open backs, because they do change like with just the slightest little change to the action, and some of the positions will have a pretty noticeable peak there in the treble. But the way that I think most people will hear it, because it's actually that's where it is different when it's coupled to the side of the head, it doesn't have that peak subjectively when you hear it. So I think it's like at around, I'm not sure if it's the one at 6K or there's one at 8K, but something like that. So yeah, it's not bright. It is actually, for most of its frequency response in the treble, it's actually warmer than the target. So K361 versus K371. I want to get so for me, K371, but I haven't done the head-to-head, so I need to do the head-to-head. Having a crappy set of headphones is necessary reminds you how good your headphones are. Yes. 400SC versus 560S. That tends to be a good comparison. Man, I don't know. In some ways, in both cases, there would be something to EQ. In some ways, I would, prefer the 400 SE because it's easier to EQ. With the 560S, it does have better bass extension and generally better balance throughout. It's just that the 4K region is a bit forward on the 560S, making it a little bit hot in the treble. So, I would EQ either of those for rock and metal. But at least the 400 SE, you shouldn't have any issues there. All it takes is a bass shelf. 560S is fatiguing to me. Kind of regret buying it over the 6XX. Yeah, I would also regret buying it over the 6. You should. No, I'm just kidding. 6XX is definitely better than the 560S. You guys are asking about like budget endgame. Favorite tubes with the Forge. I don't get a chance to listen to the Forge because Taryn has it nailed to the desk. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's Taryn is Taryn's favorite amplifier. So, yeah, I can't answer that, unfortunately. What's the most random thing you've heard and actually like? Most random thing. I mean, in some ways, the head audio headphone because it's so unique, but I guess that's not really random. That Kiwi Ears Orchestra. I mean, it was also a little bit shouty, but that's just me with IEMs. Like, good, well-tuned IEMs can often be a bit shouty for me because of my ear canal. But, like, that was an IEM where I kept thinking, wow, like, I was set out to do a comparison between the Audio Oracle and the Excalibur. And the Oracle clearly won, but then I was listening to in conjunction that the Kiwi Ears Orchestra and went, huh, kind of like the orchestra better than all of them for some music. There's other music where the Oracle's just better. Like, I'd say for most music, the Oracle's better for the tuning. But there was some pairings there with the orchestra that was just really nice. So that was probably the most random thing. I know who tuned it as well. But that one definitely. Maybe also the Symphonium Helios, but that one has a bit of a weird fit. It's the Helios is one that just sort of came out of nowhere. I was not expecting it to be as good as it was. But yeah, the fit is pretty awkward. Can you explain what organic sound signature means? I don't usually use the term organic sound signature, but like I imagine that when people say that, it's to refer to something sounding natural, which to me would be that it's got a reasonable amount of ear gain, where there's a good balance between 3 to 4 between the highest part of the ear gain at like 3 to 4K and the treble above that. So you don't have lower harmonics being boosted over upper harmonics and things like that. Or swelling of fundamental tones in the lower frequencies to sort of mask and dominate others. That's how I would characterize organic, right? If something sounds natural, effortless, right? That's probably how I would define it. Maybe not to the full level of an actual human HRTF for the level of ear gain, but something that at least has some. Drop Panda or Sony WH-1000 XM4. Why is that your choice? Stop buying those headphones. Sennheiser Momentum 3. And then just EQ down the bass, because the bass is wild on that Sennheiser. It's way too strong. Subtonic Storm. No, I haven't tried it yet. Interesting. I know something most have not heard. The HD 471G is genuinely amazing, like the K361 before AKG existed. I'll need to give that one a shot. What are your top 3 headphones at any price, no EQ allowed? That exists in the ranking list on the forum. There's a no EQ tier. Let's find out what I ranked it as, or what I picked there for top 3. Because for me, the top 3 headphones are ones that I do EQ. So for no EQ, I bet it's going to be Sundara and Utopia for the top 2 at least. Let's find it here. All right, there it is. No EQ tier. There's a lot of stuff here. No EQ tier. Okay, so Sundara, Utopia. I also have the Stax SR007 2.9 as 3rd. And I have the Shangri-La Junior as 4th, and I think I would put those two kind of side by side. I have to still do that comparison. Side by side. For no EQ. So I have here, Typhoon Sundara, Utopia, SR007 2.9, Shangri-La Junior, Clear Alex Lear with alternative pads. Then I have also the Hi-Fi Aria V3. And this is all no EQ, right? Like stuff that I would never touch with EQ. The reason the Aria V3 is below the Clear in this list is because without EQ, I actually think that I prefer the Clear's tonal balance and the Lear with Utopia pads, because I do find the Aria. I guess it depends on what I'm listening to. If I'm listening to jazz, then the Aria V3 would be higher. But if I'm listening to more, a wider range of stuff, I prefer that sort of mid-range forwardness of the focals. Then I have the LCD X 2021, also without EQ, and with EQ this gets higher, right? So that's kind of how that works. Then I also have the ZMFO Tour, Ananda Edition XS, Radiance and Celestia are there, but those are closebacks. But that's also like they're lower down, and that's all imagining that there's no EQ going on here whatsoever. So yeah. Hope that answers all of your no EQ gang questions. Spicy take. I try not to buy anything from Drop now, considering their enjoyment of reselling gray market dealer stock with scratched off serial numbers. Has that still happened? I know that happened there was like an Odyssey drama around that. So the thing that I was not too thrilled about with Drop was that their marketing was overly aggressive. So they have this whole approach of doing. So let me just back up. Drop has produced a number of stuff that is really good for the consumer, like the HD6XX and the Focal LX, and I'm sure like the Aeon X Close. Like I recommend those headphones. Like those are all very good. But you see what they did with the HE5XX and that whole debacle, where it's basically just the Deva. It's 100% the Deva, acoustically identical to the Deva. They've built their marketing engine around community, like a audiophile community, right? But the problem is that they've gone hyper aggressive on that at the same time, and probably because they have to, or they feel that they have to, and this has resulted in kind of like. It's resulted in their employees outright lying to people, like in their marketing material, like telling people, that the 5XX is totally unique. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not like the Deva, saying that the Deva is something that it's not, right? That kind of stuff. Now, I don't necessarily blame the product manager for that, because he might not have known that it was identical to the Deva, right? But I tend to think that like doing that kind of stuff with putting that messaging out there, and being overly aggressive on the marketing side of things for that, and then doubling down, I think that's led to I think that they're just trying to be too aggressive on that, and it's backfiring, like it really is. So that's again, this gets into like the question of brands and stuff like that, and again, that's why I say evaluate the products, not the brands, or focus on the products, not the brands, because with all of that said, Drop has also done some great stuff with 6XX ELX and the Aeon X closed, and to a lesser extent the Aeon X open as well. They've taken existing products and either made them cheaper or improved them for those examples, right? But then there's other examples where they're, it's not really, like the Sennheiser HD8XX is meaningfully worse. So, it's not a straight shot to all of these are good because they've had the drop treatment, or all of these are bad because they've had the drop treatment. Okay. Is the Griffin able to power the DCA stealth? Good question. Maybe not to its fullest potential. I never tried it with the stealth, but I recently did take it on a trip with me. I was visiting the Gulf Islands, which, by the way, if you ever do that, don't do it on a busy weekend, because good Lord, is it ever horrible dealing with BC ferries. Yeah, I took the Griffin with me, and I was really impressed with that device. That thing is awesome. I was like, wow, it does that too? It's not that powerful. It's only like around 1 watt. I'm not sure. 1 watt at 32 ohms. I need to double check the specs. I'm not sure. So not the last word as far as power output is concerned. But yeah, it was a very impressive device. It's honestly, I'm thinking it's probably the portable DAC amp device that I would buy, if I was constantly using stuff portably. As it is, I just use the Qdelix 5K because I usually just use IEMs portably. But like if I was wearing over-ear headphones, I'd probably go with a Griffin. That thing was dope as shit. Let's see. Have you seen the new Meze IEMs? If so, what do you think of them? I have. I listened to them last weekend. So this is an interesting one. You're talking about the Advar, right? It's very V-shaped. It reminds me of the. I think I called it briefly a. What's that Empire Ears IEM? The not the Legend X, but the Valkyrie. I called it a baby Valkyrie, where it's definitely got too much lower treble. It sounds like it, at least. So it is on the edge of sibilant and really punchy, intense bass. But it is surprisingly detailed. I've had criticisms of Meze stuff. It's been that it hasn't been all that detailed, and it really is not competitive for the price. But the new Advar, at least it's detailed, right? Like the tuning is not for me. But at least it's detailed, and it has too much of that. Well, it's probably closer to mid treble, but like you're thinking, broadly. But the area that is like close to the consonant sounds is just a bit intense for me. So the tuning can use work, but the technicalities, for I think the price point that it's at, I'd say it's appropriate. I don't think it's like beating out the variations or anything like that, but it's appropriate. At least, which is nice to see from Meze. Have you been to Headphone Bar on Main Street? Yeah, I know that guy, Travis. He's super nice, and I used to go there all the time before I did this. I used to buy headphones from him. So yeah, I know Travis. I think it's one of the few places in Vancouver where you can go there and like actually try stuff out, which is awesome. Yes, go down the headphone upgrade path over to amp DAC. As long as you have a good enough amp and DAC, then you can ignore that until you're rich. And put money into headphones, because yeah, they do make a difference. Like I'm not gonna sit here and say you're not gonna hear. There's no difference, between a Magni 3 Heresy and like a Bakun, right? There absolutely categorically is, and I'm gonna prove that. Although no, I can't use a Magni Heresy because it exploded. But also a lot of it depends on the headphones that you're using and like the combinations that you're trying to find, and that stuff does matter. But it's not like it matters more than just changing the headphones or EQing. As long as you have enough power, as long as it's a good enough setup, Modius Magnus or whatever, right? Like that stuff is good enough. And then just headphones, all the money into headphones. Don't worry about cables. Don't worry about going from a ESS 9038 Q2M to a AK 4490 whatever, right? Like don't worry about that stuff. I mean, that's just my opinion on this. Like, if I'm sure there's somebody out there who's like, no, you have to use this headphone with this amplifier. Okay, sure, but as a general, statement, it's not a good argument to say that you should spend the same amount of money on an amplifier that you do on headphones, because you don't need to. I need to like put a little sticky note here saying Alir with Utopia pads. Because it looks like an Allegia from this side. It's quite funny. And again, I keep saying I need to measure it with this amplifier to get that result. The solid state measurements of this is good. It's again, like if you know how to read measurements above 5K, like, which is not something that's easy to communicate. But if you know sort of the smoothing of the target versus the and what HRTFs look like, yeah, it's very HRTF-y in the treble, but the overall level is about where you would want it to be, and a lot better than what you got with the original pads. Aeon, thank you. Any point in getting anything aside from topping A90, D90 for high-end headphones? Oh, so you must be new. Does Soundstage really open up with 30K stack, or is that just a myth? I haven't tried a 30K stack. I've tried a 15K stack, or 15K amplifier off of a $2,500 DAC. I've also tried a $10,000 DAC. But I haven't tried a 30K stack. Yeah. So it depends, right? It's no secret I'm not a fan of the A90. I loved Golden's video, by the way, on how manufacturers will sort of try and game the Amirnad system of getting their stuff to score higher. On his ranking, and then people will buy it because it's high up there. Another example, I don't remember if he got into this. I don't think he did, but like if the A90 were measured in single-ended mode, like if it were measured off of a with its RCA connectors with a USB DAC, it would not have scored anywhere near as highly. It would have scored very, very badly, but that doesn't look good. Right? And I would argue that if you're going to be measuring a DAC and an amp, you should probably measure all of its functions. But I also understand the need for measuring it in its best use case, which is kind of what you end up with the score there. So let me just kind of get back to answering your question there. I don't think the A90 is very good. The D90 is fine, but the A90, a lot of people probably bought that because of the ranking and where it fits on that ranking. And I think it's a perfect example of manufacturers being like, oh, this is a great way to sell more products. Let's figure out how we can make it specifically do well there, even though there's no difference, right? Even though there's between stuff that scores well and stuff that scores like 80. Right, and still there's stuff that scores well that would actually be producing audible distortion products. So go watch the video we did on Synad that sort of like highlights the nonsense there. To again get back to your question, I think something else that you might want to consider is like the Rebel amp, depending on the headphones that you have. Although I don't know what the availability is like on those these days. But yeah, I think you can do a lot better than the A90. I will say that much. Is it enough for high-end headphones? I mean, depends. Does Soundstage really open? I don't know. I think I'm gonna push the doubt button on Soundstage opening up with a 30K stack. I bet there are differences, but I'm gonna push the doubt button on that one. I think the biggest one would be like what the Nagra stuff, which I haven't heard it, so I can't really say. So yeah. Here we go. What is the most unexpected thing you've found about human psychology when exploring the audio hobby? Confirmation bias shows up in all kinds of places and in all kinds of ways. So I'm not sure if you. Okay, this is turning into another, a mirror roasting session, and I don't mean it to be, because he's definitely done a lot of good things as well. But if you guys have seen the recent Reddit drama thread on, I think it was, I can't remember the person who was. He was an amplifier, amplifier manufacturer, or a manufacturer for source equipment. I think specifically to do with energizers. The name escapes me right now, but a well-known name, and was basically took Amir to task on his measurements of that system of the amplifier that he had, or energizer, and not doing it correctly. So I'm not going to address that, because that thread is just sort of kind of it sort of stokes the drama there. I'm not going to wade in on that, but what I am going to say is that there's so much confirmation bias on the other side. There's confirmation bias on the subjective side. It's ridiculous to think of these as sides, but there's so much confirmation bias on the subjective side of things, where people will attribute, they'll read something about that somebody has said about the sound quality, and then they'll listen for it, and then this confirms that it's happening, and it'll confirm the experience, even though if they hadn't read it, they might not have had that experience. Right? That stuff happens all the time, but it happens just as much on the objectivist side of things, where people will, they'll say, "Oh, look how perfect this thing measures. Look at how low the distortion is," and then because of that, make claims like, "Oh, this is just clearly better sounding, or more detailed sounding, or whatever, because look, it matches more closely," right? Or an even better example is they'll take that target, and they will let's see how to say this. Okay, they will look at the target, and they will make it match the target perfectly, right? Which is something that you shouldn't do, and we did a video on that. But just for the moment, what they'll do is they'll EQ it to perfectly match the target, because it's sort of held up on this pedestal as the god of sound quality, right? Completely leaving out the segmentation, the research that was done in the segmentation paper from Olive, Welty, and Kansarapur. Actually, I think Ahmed's stuff was involved earlier on as well, but that particular paper, it shows where the clustering of preferences were, and they weren't all at the target. That's just what the most common grouping was. So why the hell if people are EQing stuff to make it sound better to them, why the hell should they EQ it to the most dominant result there, when they don't know where they fall? Right? They're not even considering where they fall. They just want it to be objectively great. Never mind the fact that they actually like it, or whether or not they like it. That's hilarious to me. So yeah, I think that confirmation bias, to answer that question, confirmation bias, and how it shows up all over the place in this, in the audiophile world, both on the subjective side and on the objective side. And I think more surprisingly on the ways in which it shows up on the objective side. And then you have all the target adherence acolytes, as I call them, where that's all they really care about. That's all they want. And I think to myself, like, if your goal is to make it so that something doesn't sound wrong to most people, fine, do that. Care about that. But if your goal is to make something sound as good as it possibly can for you, you should probably think a little bit more nuanced about that. Like, take a more nuanced approach. Try and figure out what you actually like, and then make your adjustments accordingly. Is the Rebel amp enough for the Aria? I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's should be fine. A90 subjectively sounds more engaging using RCA single-handed. You're just getting people to incur the ground loop. And subjectively better because there's a massive noise floor. Oh god. It sounds more real. That's like vinyl. Yeah, I will do a video. I promise, guys. I promise I will do a video on the A90. Would you ever consider reviewing the Motu M2? I actually use that for like all the time, for as the interface for as the ADC. Moondrop Chew, yeah, it's probably a blind buy. It's $20. I don't even know if people need to review it at that point. I probably won't be doing a review of it. I think Precog Vision will, probably. Pro tip: if there are humans, there will be bias. So yes, but that's the other thing that I wanted to mention. This is something that Sajid Amit has said as well. And if I'm going to shout him out again for anybody who missed that, check out Amplify Audiophile Show. I think it's called the Amplify Audiophile Show, something like that. But Sajid made a really great point that we'll read a lot of things that create narratives on given products, and this creates a kind of inertia. I think, well, that's my term, but like the narratives that get created around this stuff about things like Soundstage and whatever else, like that's not just because those narratives exist. That doesn't necessarily mean that like that's the thing that's actually going to matter the most to you. And you should really almost like approach listening to something and try and like cast as much of that stuff out of your mind as possible and see what you actually enjoy the most. What's the most engaging quality for you? Because again, like this is where like Kryn, he likes Soundstage. For me, I care more about instrument separation. So yeah, that goes into it as well, right? Like the biases that get formed from narratives that we read online. I mean, it's amazing how powerful that is. And I see it a lot. You see it with headphones like the Beyerdynamic headphones. I think a lot of it also comes from people when people buy things, they want to feel confident in that their purchase is celebrated in the community, and when it's not, that doesn't feel great, right? And I think that's bound to happen, but like that's where then suddenly there's, oh, but you didn't listen to it with this amplifier, or you didn't listen to it in these conditions, or you didn't tweak your left nipple right before listening every time. Like there's all kinds of, as Kryn calls it, goalpost shifting on people when he doesn't like something, and we see it as well. And that's because people want to feel good. They want to feel confident that they like the feeling of confidence when they buy something based on a narrative, and then it kind of gets reaffirmed and confirmed, and this is confirmation bias. So yeah, that happens a lot. What stack would you recommend for Susvara then? You mentioned Rebel amp. Is that the best amp from your point of view, or is there something better? I mean, yeah, there's better. The Bakun thing was pretty interesting, very detailed. I've been listening right now to the Susvara off of the EF 1000, which is a very expensive amplifier. Um, I think it's probably too expensive. Like, it was way too expensive for me. I'd never spend that kind of money on an amp or any. Yeah, I would never do that. But somebody might. If you have tons of money and you want to get more dynamics, more punch. I hate using the term dynamics, but if you want your Susvara to be more, impactful, I guess, it was good for that. Better than what you get on the A90, for example. But that's also 15 grand or something ridiculous like that. So it's like, in my mind, it's like, is that really worth doing? No, not for me at least. Um, I am curious to try out the new Bakun, or I think it's called Enlium. Um, but yeah. Also, I really like. There's the another amplifier by. Oh man, it's the Name Unity Atom. Now it's not with the Susvara, but with other. Like, I used it with a bunch of different headphones, and found it to be also, like, I actually used it with, I think, the Aeon 2 Noir. It's single ended. It's more of like a streamer than anything else, and so that's why I like. Yeah, I mean, a streamer, like, I don't really have a use for the rest of the functions there, but I found it to be also quite engaging, even in headphones that I don't normally get that kind of like impact from. Um, so, but that's also, I didn't do blind tests with that, so take that with a grain of salt. So that's why I'm hoping to do the blind test, the ABX stuff, so that, like, when I do the reports there, when I say this is was more engaging than this one for in these different ways, I actually have something there to demonstrate that. So I'm gonna say, don't buy anything based on merely non-compared right, like, uh, uh, testimony. It has to be there. You have to actually do comparisons with things side by side, volume matched, in as little and in as quick time frames as possible. If subjective reports are to mean anything. So Spicy Take, HD100S is no way higher resolution than these nanoscale planars like Susvara and LCD4. Seems to be an uncommon opinion. I forget what Resolve thinks. Dude, really? Of course, the LCD4 and Susvara are are higher resolution than the HD100S. Like, I don't think, like, those planars, like, those are, and even the Abyss thing, man, like, those high end planars are like a category above. They are a next level. Like, when you hear that stuff, it is not. I don't find it that close. Um, but if it's all just frequency response, can't you just EQ it to match it? No. Yeah, like LCD5, for example, is definitely more detailed than the HD100S. It's not brighter. It's a lot more mid forward, a lot more relaxed treble, but it is definitely more detailed than the HD100S. Yeah, Dacs as well. Yeah. And same with that Shangri-La Junior. I mean, I know, but those are also, like, way more expensive. It's not really fair, right? I think a fair comparison is like to the, maybe Focal Clear or Aria. That HD100S versus Aria. Dare I say the Aria is more detailed? When I say more detailed, it's like that. The problem there is that we're not necessarily all talking about the same thing, because some people are like, yeah, more treble equals more resolution, and that's obviously not how I think about it. But, like, um, you know, people aren't necessarily talking about the same thing. This is why Wittgenstein is so important, and the private language argument, or the private language problem, creeps into this, because you know, um, there's no way to know what somebody means when they say detail. I think over time you can get a sense. Like, I think Metal and I kind of think of it the same way. But yeah. Do you think the clear MG resolves better than HG100S? No. But it's also got a more relaxed tuning in general. Yeah. I really like my SA6, but did I get a reviewer discount? But you did get a review discount. Okay, it's quite relaxing. I'm curious what that was because I want one. No, I mean, I don't really buy products anymore because I never have time to use them. So, yeah. Are you stealth versus HG100S? Man, I don't know. That is a good question, and I think if it's me, I prefer the Aria stealth. Even though there are things about the HG100S, like the build, the design, the ergonomics, it's outstanding. And also, yeah, I mean, it is still definitely detailed. It has that sort of effortless quality. I think in both cases, you'd probably be going for jazz and acoustic classical instrumental music. I would probably not choose those for rock and metal. But at least with the Aria, you can EQ that sucker like crazy in the bass if you want to, I guess. I mean, maybe not like crazy, but you could certainly EQ it if you want to. My only issues really with the Aria stealth is that the like upper mid to treble, like the strongest part of the ear gain there is like it's still just like a little strong for me, right? So maybe running it off of like a tube amp or something that softens that a little bit might be a good way to go. But I haven't done that, so I'll need to try that. But yeah, solid. I mean, I think the 6K peak or whatever, like on the HE100S, so it's not as prominent on the Aria, even though it has some other issues. So I think a little lower down, but yeah. But yeah, the idea that the HD100S is on the level for detail as like a Susvara, no. I can't. I mean, maybe somebody hears it that way, but that's not for the way that I think of detail, at least. But what is detail? Isn't Crin's ranking tonality and technicality, so not only detail in the latter? So this is the thing, right? Yeah, it's Crin highly indexes when he talks about technicality. He highly indexes for Soundstage, and he said so on the stream that we did recently together. He talked about how when he's listening, that he actually prefers listening to speakers than headphones, right? Because he likes the sense of space that you get with speakers, and when he hears headphones that are like speakers in the sense that they are very wide and very soundstagey, that's something that he's drawn to, and I totally respect that, right? So that's why it makes perfect sense that the HD100S would be ranked highly on his list. But I don't think, again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, I don't think there's even I don't think that they're in the same conversation on the same tier for something like instrument separation and control during busy passages, or the clarity for trailing ends of tones, even though it's very good on the HD100S. So all of those other things that we might be talking about for the subjective qualia stuff, right? Apart from Soundstage, is going to be better on the Susvara. And if you go to the LCD4, other things will be better, right? Like, again, control during busy passages, instrument separation, and all that stuff. But I don't think Soundstage is going to be better, right? I didn't even know where he ranks the HD100S. So I know he ranks the Susvara highly. But again, that's a ranking list by one person, and which he even puts as a disclaimer at the top. And it's meant to be a sort of a snapshot. And I think people index, when they see the ranking, they index far too much on technicalities, and nowhere near enough on tonality. Because tonality, especially for those who aren't EQing stuff, people will be like, I just want to get the most technical sounding thing, the most whatever, right? Whatever gets thought of as there for resolution, without any thought to the significance of tonal balance. Because for overall enjoyment, I'm actually going to say tonal balance matters a lot more. So yeah, detail is the absence of non-detail. Boy. Great. Yeah, actually, what's funny is I did the foam mod on the Rode NTH 100, and when I did the measurement there, it was shockingly good for the measurement. I was like, wow, that measures well. but it still doesn't sound very good. It still sounds like hazy and smeared, and yeah. C tonality and S technicalities. I would not give it an S in technicalities. I would give it an A+ in technicalities. But yeah, he's just one guy doing his best, and I agree. I think it's a super useful list, and I think that's why like he and I agree on the approach for many things. I think we listen for different things, as most reviewers do, and attention goes to different things when you're doing reviews. And what you care the most about isn't necessarily going to be the same for everybody. So Metal would give the HD100S something like A- technical. I have some thought on that, and I think it's probably because the bass in the HD100S is kind of not that special. So heard the Meze Elite for the first time today. Extremely disappointing. I'm telling you, man, like I said that, okay, the Empyrean was like, great for build and aesthetics and all that stuff, and had an enjoyable tonality, apart from the treble. But generally, it was this sort of like relaxed kind of presentation that was nice. Just does not have the same technical capabilities as what its price point asks. And I said that, and then basically Boomerfi came out of the woodwork and started attacking me for that. And not just me, but like the other people who were reviewing it who said the same thing. Well, I shouldn't say Boomerfi, that's mean, but like you get what I mean, right? There were a lot of people who didn't like that we said, oh, it wasn't quite as technical. But the other side of it is like, if you like something, those people who really liked the Empyrean or the Meze headphones there, who cares what we say? So this feeds back into that idea about like people love having confidence that their opinions are, it's like opinion validating, right? Or purchase validating. This is what when Kryn posted on Twitter saying, here's the new ranking list, let all of your opinions be validated. I think that's kind of what he was getting at. And I get it. Like I see it as well. With that said, I do think the Elite was better than the Empyrean. For the treble, that balance was better. It's still a bit weird in some places, like 400 hertz, and then at around 1K is a bit weird, but yeah. But the thing to consider as well, and I want to just raise this, I'll get to that in a second, but I want to just raise that like people buy headphones for all kinds of reasons. If you think about headphones as just a sound delivery device, then a ranking like even the one that I've done or the one that Kryn's done, those types of rankings can be useful. But you also need to factor in that people buy headphones for reasons that have nothing to do with sound quality. Like, for example, ergonomics, like aesthetics, like build quality, the engineering and the mechanical industrial design on all of the Meze headphones. It's outstanding. It's class leading. So if those things really matter to you, then it doesn't, like that, the whole calculus has to shift. The only thing for me, again, that I go back to is that I don't like the idea of high-end audio products becoming like designer handbags. That's the thing that I'm going to push back against. It's fine if you want to spend an extra $1,000 on something because it is ergonomically and mechanically outstanding. Or you love the way it looks. that's fine, right? Even if the price, even if it's not competitive at that price point for its sound quality. But just because, like, the idea of, like, designer luxury brands for the sake of designer luxury clout is something that, like, it at least needs to be something that is generally good in order for those types of efforts to matter to me. Yeah, I am very curious about the X9000. Son Goku, thank you. Is Focal's beryllium driver headphone much punchier than Focal's aluminum magnesium M-shaped driver headphones? I currently use the Radiance with EQ. It's an interesting question. Hmm. I don't know how I'm going to answer that. It is close enough to... So, be very careful about how I say this. It is close enough that you will notice a bigger difference when it comes to bass level, like the actual physical, like the actual level of the bass, in which the Radiant, in the case of the Radiance, it is significantly bassier than the Utopia. Right, it's closed back, it's got a bass boost, but for what Precog and I call macro contrast, I still think that the Utopia is better. So yeah, if you're chasing this quality, that is this nebulous macro contrast quality that some things have and some things don't, I put the Utopia kind of at the top of that list, along with there's a couple other headphones, but I put the Abyss thing up there, like with the AB1266 up there. I put the Hi-Fi Man HE6 up there. To a lesser extent, the LCD4, and someone's going to meme about sources on that, and I'm sure, but the same is true for the HE6. What else? In IEMs, I'm going to put the 64 audio IEMs up there. Like the U6T, even though it's all BAs, it's outstanding for that. The Aurorus Audio Borealis is great for that. So yeah, if you're chasing that quality, the Utopia is definitely next level. I haven't compared the Stellia as much with the Radiance though, so I'm not sure if I'm not sure about that, to be honest. But at the same time, I think if you want just a lot, if you're a bass head and you want both of those things, you want good level and you want that sort of that macro contrast quality, I think probably the Radiance might be better because it actually has an elevated bass, whereas the Utopia is more mid-forward. Let's go just a little bit more here. People have vastly different preferences, hearing, and musical tastes. There's almost no... Okay, now is the time for all the spicy questions, if you were holding them. People have vastly different preferences, hearing, and musical tastes. There's almost nothing objective to be said that is true for all of the spectrum. If the spectrum is from bad to good, I'm gonna say that's false. I get why you're saying that, but we also have to recognize that humans have ears. Where I agree is in, like, the fact that we have ears and HRTFs, and there's a general trend for that, says nothing about how you want your music to sound. If you want your music to all sound like Burzum, that's fine, right? If you this is maybe a bit of a harsh example, but you get what I mean, right? Like, if you want your music to be super grating sounding, right? Like, the human HRTF, that, getting closer to that is not as important as getting it to be what your preference is. But there is also a demonstrated trend that people are more likely to like headphone tunings that are closer to their HRTFs because it sounds more natural. So yeah, I think there is actually an objective anchor to sound quality. And you can find that anchor in research done at the Aalborg University by Hammershøi and Mahler, and also the Harman research. You can find that anchor very well there, and that's really why we use it as a reference point. But the idea that everybody needs to everybody has to want their music to sound the same, no. But it's precisely because people don't want their music to sound the same that preference tilts exist in the first place. Or that the cluster analysis was done and that the research was done. They're trying to figure out, okay, what are the trends? What is the most common grouping there? And that's really, I think, the biggest pitfall that people run into when they criticize the Harman targets. They don't realize that it's done specifically because people have different preferences. Like if you just wanted purely anatomically, objectively correct, you would read the 1995 Hammershøi and Mahler. What is it? That headphone design parameters or headphone design? Design criteria for headphones. That's what it's called. And then you would use DF-HRTF tunings, which nobody likes. Very few people like. At least there's no trend there that would show that people prefer that over Harman. So yeah. Best for movies: Focal Clear, Hi-Fi Man Aria, Abyss Diana V2. For movies, I'm gonna say Clear. Out of that list, yeah. But I only heard the Diana V2 at a show, at a meetup, and I just wasn't impressed. And so they may have done some, like, I was much more impressed with the Diana Phi with a DMS pad mod than I was with the Diana V2. But yeah, if you're also for movies, I mean, in some ways, I'd almost say like if you're doing like Apple TV with the like surround stuff, maybe it's worth exploring that. But if you like all of this stuff, I'd say is much more centered towards music than movies. I actually, even in some ways, think with movies you'd probably want even more bass, but because like there's no standard for linearity for movies as far as I know. But generally, good headphones for music will also be good for movies. But yeah, out of that list, I would personally probably choose the Clear. Spicy question time. I cannot listen to Burzum. I don't think Burzum is something that you're supposed to listen to. That's a spicy take. I think Burzum is more just an idea. For $600, you can get the HE6 SEV2, which is insane. Yes, it is. It really is. If it works. That's always the risk, man. But, like as someone was saying as well on Reddit, like people are complaining about the Hi-Fi Man build quality. It's like, I think also we have to recognize that, like, all brands have failure rates. So, unless somebody's publishing them, right? And you're basically just getting whatever the base rate is of people who bought, Sundaras, which is probably pretty high. With that said, I think even Sennheiser has failure rates that are, like I had a 660S, the first review unit that I got had a massive channel imbalance, so now I'm not going to make a post on Reddit about that, but I'm just pointing out that like even brands that I would consider to be better for their QC and their, reputation there than Hi-Fi Man still have issues, and nobody is immune from that. And when you get something where the driver is dead, you just send it back, right? If we all listen to soulless audiophile jazz, then we'd have a standard frame of reference. But even then, like who's to say that everybody wants their soulless audiophile jazz to be to sound the same, right? Like I might like the way I might want my soulless audiophile jazz to be more mid forward. Maybe somebody else wants their soulless audiophile jazz to be brighter, right? Maybe somebody likes the warmer tones of that and just wants to sort of sink into the chair with his EMF, right? Like that's sort of what I'm saying. Is Precox still with headphones? Of course. course. He went to Singapore to do coverage of Can Jam Singapore. So there's a video on that coming out soon. I believe. I haven't checked it out yet. I need to still do that. But yeah, we'll publish that soon. So he came back, I think a week ago. Yeah. I really want the Diana TC, but not many trusted reviews on them. Yeah. I want to see some measurements. You can say that for 95% of people this is true, but if one person asks which one of these headphones they prefer, you can never be sure. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Best view of burst. Which mid-fi headphone that you once reviewed highly have you since changed your mind about? Good question. Mid-fi though. Mid-fi or better. Okay. It's funny because I initially thought that the answer there would be the Allegia, but then I went back and watched that review of the Allegia, and I thought to myself, no, I kind of think about it like that now. It's one that I EQ'd from the beginning. There's definitely stuff that I have changed my mind about. I would probably say the Night Owl. That was like one of the very first reviews I ever did. When I discovered the value of ear gain. Maybe Philips Fidelio X2s. When I first got them, I kind of liked them, and then the more I listened to them, the more I hated them. I sold them. I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. What else? Maybe the original D8000. Maybe. It's still fantastic for much of it, but the tuning is a bit weird. I'll grant that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There's definitely stuff that I've changed my mind about. Yeah. But there's nothing like that that's like totally one way and then the other. Yeah. I think the things that I've changed my mind about, though, would be more like how I would categorize things. Like, for example, I think in one of my like really early on videos when I was comparing the different, like the Allegia with the Alex and the Clear, I think I put the Alex behind the Allegia, but that's without realizing how significant of a difference how significant the pads are in the tuning. And after switching the pads, sorry, Elir, not Alex. After switching the pads, yeah, I mean, I would definitely rate it way higher than the Allegia. And I did in my Alex review, right? Because I actually did review the Alex. So I would put the Alex and the Clear like very close to one another. The Clear is a little more refined in the treble, whereas the Alex is a bit bit intense. But yeah, it's much better than the default pads that came on the Elir, and that's really why that perception was what it was. But so I'd say, yeah, that kind of ranking, I would change my mind on that. Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Please review Atrium. Yeah, DMS is doing that on his channel, I think. Just placed the order for the Focal Utopia. Thanks for hyping them up. Resolve, there goes 4K. Oh, I hope you like them. I mean, yeah, Utopia, like if I, my two favorite headphones, right? And I have this on my ranking list, Sundara and Utopia. Um, Utopia, so this is the thing. You know how I use these all the time, the Alir with the Utopia pads off of the Amson Sound Kenzie, right? 32 ohm out. Because this is also an ADM headphone, like the Alir, and this is the reason why I'm using this and not the clear, okay? It would be different with a different amplifier with the clear. But the reason, yeah, you can do the same thing with the Alir that you can, and the Lex, that you can with the Utopia, because they are both ADM headphones. So if you, and then that's really why I don't know, this is guilty pleasure, like definitely this one off of, because it down tilts the whole thing. It's totally guilty pleasure, but it is such an enjoyable tuning that I just love it. So yeah, I mean, there's all the stuff that you can do as far as source pairing with these yeah, it makes it so much fun. Also high on that list with EQ is the Odyssey LCD5, because it's finally a lightweight Odyssey. I need to still get that headband, the big boy headband, because it was definitely too clampy for me with my glasses. But yeah, with EQ, the LCD5 was pretty impressive. What would you say is the best headphone at about $300 for listeners of rock and metal? So I can tell you what I would do. I would buy a Sundara 2020, because that's $300 now, I think. I would buy an amplifier. Maybe if you have an output that already has an amplifier, which a lot of motherboards do now. You probably don't need one, but you know, it's good to have one. DAC amp combo is what you need there, something like that. And then I would just EQ it. That's what I would do. But failing that, if you don't EQ or don't want to buy an amp and a DAC, if you just want to buy headphones, $300, what would I recommend for rock and metal? 400 SE and an amplifier. No, I'm just kidding. Harmonic Dyne Zeus. Oh, somebody mentions it. Harmonic Dyne Zeus. There you go. It's a bit V-shaped, right? But it's pretty good. As long as you get one that's got good channel matching, because the one that I had, the channel balance was bad. But I would expect that the channel matching would be better. DMS is a busy guy. He is a busy guy. Did you find any correlation in measurements in terms of slam, like Utopia versus Ananda? No. No, this is still one of those things in measurements that's elusive. You know, I'm working on a project right now that's trying to identify where some of these qualities come from, but I'm focused more on blunting versus clarity for trailing ends of tones, like the detail question. And I made some progress, and it has much more to, like, maybe there is something you can find there in the measurements, but nothing that's predictive, right? What I've found is that there is actually more, I'm not sure how much I can talk about this yet, but what I found is that there's more, there were more interesting results when I changed, when evaluating different diaphragm materials. So I think this idea, like the idea basically that Corinne has talked about as well, that there are certain properties of transducers that just you can't analyze measurements in terms of those properties, that can be better or worse. So far, that seems to be correct based on my testing. That doesn't mean that that stuff isn't captured by the measurements. It's just that you can't, like, I can't find specifically the behavior there. So, and also more testing needs to be done. So it's, the whole process for this is we're controlling for different, trying to do as much as we can to control for to control different parameters, right? So, or control 4 different parameters. So only testing one parameter at a time, keeping everything constant, like frequency response, as best as possible. Now, that as best as possible requires a grain of salt, because you don't know how that is actually going to be at the eardrum of individual people, specifically me in this case. That's really where I think the biggest gap between, materials seeming to make a difference and, measured results, data, is concerned. Because even if you get the same result on a rig, that doesn't mean you're getting the same results at the actual eardrum. Before, whether EQ is used or not. So, yeah, it's tricky. But we're working on it. We'll get there. The next issue there is going to be to try and make it so that these findings are beyond just one person, right? Because I can say whatever I'm saying about this, but that doesn't mean anything until it can be demonstrated with multiple people. And it might be the case that if something is closer to my HRTF, that it's meaningfully better for me, but not meaningfully better for somebody with a different HRTF, right? So there is that issue potentially as well. Which is another reason why headphones shouldn't all be tuned the same. I saw a comment there. It was interesting. Is it better to be actually blind to blind test? Don't gouge your eyes out. Real audiophiles take their eyes out. Oh, God. Yeah, blind ABX is what we're aiming for. I have reservations about blind testing. It's a little bit of like basically a pigeon. Like, my concern is effectively pigeonholing an idea into different ternary knowledge structures. So 3-part knowledge structures versus 2-part knowledge structures, and that idea is something that it's been an axe of mine to grind for a long time in other topics, and I see it happen here too, though, where just because you can okay, say you have 2 devices, right? In a blind test, you're able to correctly identify device A from device B. What happens if you have 5 devices, right? Now, you might be able to, so just because you can identify a difference there doesn't mean that among the 5 devices you'd be able to guess them all correctly. So I experiencing a difference is not an indication of is not, to me at least, is not an indication of knowledge. Now, the other side of that is that maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe we shouldn't care. Maybe all we should care about is identifying a difference. And if that's the case, I'm all in favor of blind testing and ABX testing. I think we should do it. But if we're trying to use that to give a description of sound quality, that's kind of where things fall apart a little bit. Because at that point, you're not listening for what it sounds like. You're just listening for differences. And you're going to a totally different kind of mindset when you're doing that. Do you think getting the RSV still a go these days? No. It's a good IEM. I like it. It's really well tuned. But it's not very, I had trouble with the comfort. The thick nozzles really get to me. But then also, I think there are more technical IEMs that also have good tunings at that price now. So yeah. What happened to Crin's new better rig measurements he mentioned on your stream? Oh, you mean the B&K? I think he ordered it. I'm not sure if he has it, but because there is, I think, lead time. But also, even if he does, it takes time to get those measurements up and running. So even if he had it this month, you probably wouldn't see stuff right away, because it's one thing. Well, a couple of things to that. It's one thing to have a measurement database in general, but it's another thing to have a measurement database populated. And then the third thing is that there's no standard targets, no reference points for the 5128 yet. I imagine Kryn wants to try and set that reference point. So maybe I'll talk to him about that, and we can make sure that it actually includes the bottom part of the ear gain. But I think, I think he'll probably have that up and running soon, which is exciting. I'm excited for that, and I know at some point we're gonna need to get one too. It's just that those are very expensive. R70X is great, but I'd still go for 6XX over or Sundara instead. I agree. I also would. What exotic headphones have you not heard but would like to? HE1. That new Dacs headphone. It's pretty cool. So the Elysian stuff. That new the Diana TC. I'd love to review that one, but I don't think that'll be possible, not unless somebody wants to send one in for evaluation. Will the Amp Sound Mogwai 8-ohm plus Radiance change the frequency? I think the biggest. I think it would matter over 10. I think 8 is probably okay with the focals. The bigger thing that I'd be worried about there is noise floor. So, and I haven't tried that combination. So I can't weigh in on that. 8 you'd probably be okay. It might just a little bit increase the bass, but because it's a 32 ohm headphone, right? So just trying to think. That's one where you'll want to ask Alan, because I think he might even have one. So ask Alan about that, or just how. It could be any of the 32 ohm focals to see if that changes the frequency response. But it might be fine. It might be just like very minimal. But the bigger issue could be noise floor. Hi Andrew, HE6S EV2 or 2021 LCD-X with EQ. If you're just handing me either of those, I go with the LCD-X 2021 with EQ. I'd probably EQ both, but but they're not the same price. So the HE6S EV2 frequently goes on sale for under $700, and at that point it's definitely better value. Okay. Kennerton is underrated. They're like ZMF kind of. I have not liked any of the Kennerton headphones I've tried. They all sound, they were all overly front damped, and they had like you could physically see it, and they sounded very blunted and dull, along with high driver mode behavior, like weird driver mode behavior in the mids as well. So like very ragged and jagged responses, which isn't always. Oh, sorry. The net force. If you're talking to, like, if you're asking about the Forge, just ask. He's in all kinds of communities, but he is the guy who does the customer service there. And we've had him on the live stream as well. Thoughts about the LCD-R? It was okay. I think it was held back by the shit energizer I was using there with it, because I needed to try it with I need to get some better ESTAT energizers in, or not ESTAT because it's not ESTAT. Some whatever other people were driving with it. It's actually technically not a ribbon driver. It's just a zero impedance driver, I believe, but it's not. At least it's not a traditional ribbon driver. If you think about like actual ribbon driver headphones, that there's only like 2 of them that I'm aware of. It's the RAL and the that one from the Chi-Fi one. That was what was the gold planar one. But the LCR is one that does change a lot depending on the sources. So if you have a different speaker amplifier, maybe. But off of the Jot A, I think it was called, it just wasn't anything that special. It was just a little bit meh. Like If you handed me that or an LCD-X 2021, I'd probably still take the LCD-X 2021. But of course, that all changes. That is one of those more esoteric headphones that, like, I bet if you ran that off of a crazy speaker amp, you'd probably get a different result. How has your journey into keyboards been? I need to swap out these Boba U4Ts. Whoever recommended them, you did me wrong. They're too stiff. Metal recommended some other ones I got to try out as well. But I still want to go tactile. I just don't want it to be that stiff. Yeah. If I invested in the Sundara, what is the best amp to drive them without going over 1K? I don't know. I honestly couldn't answer that. You would want something not over 1K. Because it's funny, because like a lot of the time with the ultra high end stuff, people are asking like, what's like the high end thing I should get for it. In some ways, I don't recommend this amplifier for most situations, but for the Sundara, it might be okay. The balanced output of the IHA6 would be a decent choice there. I would also recommend the Pro ICANN, but the problem is that is more expensive. That is over 1K. Also Rebel amp, but that's just single ended. So there needs to be like a Rebel amp that's balanced. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that much of an answer for you, because the Sundara pairings that I've done have been like, well, yeah, I've ran it off the Magni Heresy just to see, but like it's been like the Bakun or like the EF1000, IHA6, yeah, or that Vioelectric HPA V550, which is also expensive. So yeah. Close back under 500. No, you want the drop Aeon X closed. That's what I'm going to recommend. Are electrostatics very hard to care for? Is it worth going electrostatic, like Energizer, dust, moisture? From what I've heard, it is more annoying, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, the bigger barrier with E-stats is actually the Energizer question. But yeah, like I use an E-stat all the time, that Shangri-La Junior, with the Junior amp. It's one of my favorites. But yeah, there is an extra barrier to entry there. The dust and moisture thing, I think as long as you are in a reasonable environment and it's not getting super dusty or anything, it's probably okay. But there, people do cover them for reasons. Yeah. Rebel amp is God, no need for balanced. I was only thinking if he wanted more headroom for power and EQ and something like that. That's really the only thing I was thinking about. But the Rebel amp would be fine for that. If you can find one, man. I don't know. Like, because the designer I think is in Ukraine, so I'm not sure how that's going. What do you think about the Keyboard Ears Orchestra on Monarch Mark II? Monarch Mark II is definitely better. Definitely better. You should really recommend the Aeon RT versus the Drop X, as they are the same headphone, but you don't have to deal with drop. So I would do that if I could confirm that they are the same headphone, but I can't, because I've seen measurements of the RT that are very different from the Drop X closed. I've measured two Drop X closed, and they measured basically, well, very similar to one another. There was some difference because the pads are very influential in the tuning, but there was a bit of a channel imbalance on one of them that I had, and that's why I asked to get another one in. And then I saw a measurement of the Aeon RT, and it was very different. So my answer to that is maybe they are, but I can't confirm that, and I haven't seen any measurements that do. So if you hear it, straight from DCA that they are the same headphone, then by all means. But they haven't told me that, and I haven't. I know there's people talking about that maybe they're tuned the same, but until we see measurements of them, it's hard to say that. But then sure, I would. I think the way that stuff works though is that like they have specific they'll make an ask for a specific type of design, and then it becomes a drop product. I think that's how that works. So DCA is just functioning as the factory there. Any tips on hearing details of a headphone? Listen to it. Okay. This is actually kind of an interesting question, because it's not everybody is like, it's taken me a while to now know very strongly, very clearly what I'm listening for, to make those kinds of judgments. And you have to kind of approach, I said this before and it's going to sound counterintuitive, but like I've said it, but you have to kind of listen as if you're not listening to your own music. Listen to your own music, stuff that you're familiar with, right? You know how it sounds. List of 10 tracks maybe, but listen as if it's not like, listen as if you're not listening to the music, and then compare headphones. That's sort of the starting point I would go at, because oftentimes what happens, that's so influential in people's enjoyment, is they'll start listening to their music and they go, oh, I really like my music. And then that's no longer a perceptive evaluation of the headphones in the way that you're wanting it to be, right? That's no longer critical analysis of the headphones. That's just you enjoying your music. So that would be my advice. And I think the other two things are, listen for how clear the trailing ends of tones are on things. It's hard to do unless you have an experience with a wide range of headphones, but like, listen for how clear the trailing ends of tones are. And if they are sort of lopped off, and blunted sounding, dull sounding, that's an absence of detail. And that can be like a great example, right? I mean, I'm not saying this isn't related to frequency response, because I'm sure it is, but take the DCA, the little foam inserts, felt inserts, and you could stack them on top of each other, and that will incrementally, or you just use one and then the other and increase the thickness. That will incrementally reduce, it'll incrementally dull the trailing ends of tones. Second thing that I would listen for is how easy is it to hear individual instrument lines in busy passages. So if you're listening to a vocal harmonies or orchestral music, or for me it's often jazz, where there's different instruments going on. There's a guitar, there's a trumpet, there's a piano. I'm just making stuff, upright, double bass, whatever. How well can you discern those individual instruments in the mix? And headphones that are bad at technicalities kind of smear together and blend together, and they sound mushy. But headphones that are really good are very articulate. They sound, this is where I think attack and decay and transient and speed, all that stuff, those terms, I think that's where it comes from, because when it's good, it sounds like that. It sounds like, oh, this is a very well controlled presentation of instrument lines. But that's all just audiophile jargon here. I think that's also why that audiophile jargon has emerged the way that it has. I'm trying to get Resolve to review that Sono, the MDR 7506. Michael, thank you. I look forward to these every weekend. Yeah, I look forward to doing them as well. It's a lot of fun to get to talk to people and connect. I'm trying to get Resolve to review that Sony. The fact that it's still the primary recommendation from the Wirecutter kills me. Oh man. Is she memeing? Um, listen to the music, not the graph. Yeah, so I would ordinarily I would agree with that. But if you were trying to listen for, if you're trying to do critical analysis of a headphone, you got to listen for more than just your music, right? Because you're just gonna enjoy your music at that point. In fact, I'd say you have to specifically not listen to your music. um, that's why you shouldn't become a headphone reviewer. uh, It's a little bit like if anybody's done like that, like close reading exercise in like undergrad English classes, where they make you go through like literature passages and like do the critical analysis and close reading, and then if you do that, you just sort of realize that you just stop enjoying any of it. It's a little bit like that. Maybe yeah. If I do the MDR 7506, if I really do hate it, I'm gonna make the video title "Stop recommending this." That's great. Um. Oh, the Gustard. I don't have any experience with that. The only thing is, watch the. Not that this matters because apparently you can fix this issue with just lowering digital volume, but if you watch the Golden Sound or Golden One video on why on why you shouldn't worry too much about the measurements of that stuff, he talks about intersample overs, and he specifically I'm not sure which Gustard he uses, but it was one of the Gustards that showed how they were kind of gaming the system a little bit by or gaming the scores. Um, Oh, and according to the description, yeah, I would say you can safely ignore most descriptions. Um, you know, like this is the other soapbox that I get on is that like spec sheets for headphones and amplifiers are it's maybe not for amplifiers, but for headphones, it's like the most useless thing ever. um, for amplifiers, it does make sense because you want to you need to know like what the power outputs are and all the different the output impedance and all that stuff. But the other gripe I have with that, and the reason why I kind of mentioned that is like they're not always the same. Like they don't use the same formats, so sometimes it's very somebody need to use like some obscure calculator to like make an actual comparison between two amplifiers. That's ridiculous. I wouldn't I don't know rely too heavily on descriptions and spec sheets and stuff like that. At least for now. I don't know, maybe I do like there is a trend that's moving in the right direction where people are putting frequency response measurements on spec sheets or like in descriptions, which is great. I've seen that a couple of times. I like that. I mean, so much of this is kind of like even just what I'm reading right now from you guys. I wish I could just like put headphones on you guys and be like, "Do you like that? How does that sound to you?" I wish I could just do that. It would be so much easier, right? And that's why I wish sound demos weren't so unreliable and, but yeah, it shows that like there's a lot of um ideas that people have about headphones and how they sound that it doesn't necessarily like people want to know, okay, how much better is X than Y, but it's like I can't tell you that without having you experience it. I can tell you certain things, say yeah, this is a lot better, but like it doesn't mean anything until you actually get to hear it. um Oh, sorry, the Gustard H16, the headphone amp. Yeah, sorry, I'm talking about a DAC, not an amp. And I don't know which one it was. Um, yeah, I'm going to basically ignore most of the DAC amp questions for now, because I've sort of said my piece on that multiple times, because I mean, otherwise these streams just become, let's talk about why amps and DACs don't matter very much. They do matter. But yeah, I'm going to wait until I actually have the equipment set up to be able to do proper DAC and amp evaluations, including ABX comparisons, and then we will dive into that, okay? So I'm just going to, for now, ignore most of the amp DAC questions. Unless it involves memeing on the A90, because that's just fun. No, I'm just kidding. Headphone cafe, that would be such a cool idea. Yeah, there's even more of that kind of stuff. No, but you cannot do, like, sound demos are meaningless for the most part, because you have to keep in mind that there's the condition of the headphone being on whatever rig or on whatever person it is, that is being recorded through the HRTF of that rig or person, that then is being played back on your equipment, which is changing the sound, and then also interacting with your HRTF. So you think about that, that's a lot of compounding going on here. Now, you could theoretically create sound demos for yourself. Theoretically, that would be a reliable representation of the headphones that you're listening to. You could theoretically do that, but to have it be something that a wide group that'll be applicable to a large audience, never. You could never do that, unless you have some way of, like, mapping an HRTF, like, and compensating for it, which I don't know how anybody's going to do that across the internet. To understand the sound demo of a $100 headphone, you need the $10,000 audio system. Not even that, man. Not even that. It's just this very simple fact of compounding that breaks the usefulness of sound demos. It's just about, just think about how that works. Yes, I guess so, but it could be used to be compared to other sound demos. So sound is not accurate, but so yeah. At best, it is, in the best cases of sound demos, which most sound demos are not done this way, but in the best cases, you only get comparative value. But the problem, even with comparative value, is something that might be a peak in the actual headphone can end up being a null in the sound demo, or vice versa, right? And the comparative, when you're doing the comparison there, that's not going to show up. That's not necessarily going to be accurate. And so, in order for a comparison to be of value, you at least need some of it to be accurate, and it's not. But yeah, like, I get what you're saying. Like, you can get a general sense of, this is warmer, this is brighter. But at that point, I think, why not just look at frequency response, right? You can do that very easily. Beyond that, there's nothing. Like, I will say, I did think it was cool when Olive did the HD800 comparison. Obviously, that's not what it sounds like, but when you do the HD800S comparison with, like, the frequency response there, it does get wider, and it shows that, like, that trend of the dip and then the treble emphasis, that does have an effect on Soundstage. It's not at all like looking at graphs, though. It's yeah. If it was just you doing it, you could. Yeah. Then it would work. Yeah. Because you could actually, but then what's the point? Like, I suppose the reason to do that would be if you could EQ everything to the same result, but then still, if it still somehow sounded different, you could try and figure out why that was. That would work. Or if you had a control with a number of people, which is something we were actually working on, a control group of people that you could make sure they had all the same playback equipment, you'd still end up with the compounding of like the fact that the coupling is different, on their head with their playback equipment and their own HRTF. But you could say, okay, well, ballpark, this is where we're at, so that would be better. But the bigger issue is that you, in a at scale, or at a wide scale with lots of people, you can't possibly control for that. What's wrong with the A90? Welcome, you must be new. Oh god, it's such a meme at this point. I don't hate it as much as I just don't like the narrative around it that exists because of the specific condition that it was measured in, and people bought it in mass because of its ranking on Syned, which is meaningless. So that I more just don't like the narrative around it. That's more than not liking the amplifier that much. Let's see. You guys are talking about trolls now. Yeah, there's a bunch of trolls, and it's like every community. You're always going to get people like that. Yeah, it is an impressively long stream, and I do need to bounce as well. It's compensated for a graph. Wait, it's a compensated for a graph? Okay, it's a compensated graph. Oh, FR graph, okay. But you don't know what the compensation is, but you get to hear the sound instead of looking at the line. No, I get the value of experiential stuff here, yeah. But and I wish that it could be accurate, but the problem is you have way too many compounding effects going on, that you're not actually getting what you see on the graph. You're not getting that result at your eardrum. You're getting something very different from that. So that's why. All right, yeah. It has been a very long stream, guys, and I do need to also bounce. So thanks to everybody for joining, and thank you for all of your questions, especially the spicy ones. Love that stuff. Yeah, this is fun. This is the airing of the grievances, apparently, which is also good. But yeah, look forward to more videos from us in the coming days. I should have that Rode NTH 100 video tomorrow. It's already done. It's up on the channel, but I'll publish it tomorrow. And as always, if you guys want to check out the measurement database that we have so far, that's linked in the description. It's up on the forum. Big thanks to Defineers for putting that together. And then there's also a ranking list there for anybody who wants that. And then lastly, for any of the articles that we do, including the NTH 100 article, that's up on headphones.com already as well. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one.